Hello and welcome. My name is Paul Jacobs. I'm a team lead on the Sophos incident response team. And over the last 2 years, my team has been involved in investigating over 250 significant cyber attacks. And these range from network breaches, data exfiltration, and ransomware deployment, all of which causing significant business impact to the victims of these attacks. And I'm going to talk briefly about the most common methods attackers have used to gain access into those incidents we've investigated, and also detail a little bit about why a comprehensive and continual risk management approach is essential to a robust cybersecurity policy. Unfortunately, this video is not going to be long enough to go into any deep dives about these aspects. It's just a whistle-stop tour of the main vectors that we have seen attackers exploit to gain access to these networks. And the three topics I want to raise are OpenRDP. This is where a Windows remote desktop protocol is made publicly available on the internet. The second point I want to raise is poor patch management and asset management. And the final part I'll just briefly cover is the importance of multi-factor authentication. Now I want to just show you very quickly some of the activity that occurs when Windows Remote Desktop is publicly exposed onto the internet. In this instance, it's a device that is exposed on port 3389, but changing the port has no effect. Attackers will still find it and it will still be subjected to exactly the same activity. This is just a standard Windows Server 2022 build. I have a Sophos installed on it so that I can obtain additional telemetry. But other than that, there's nothing special about this device. It's not joined to a domain and neither are any domain names pointing at it. So in effect, it's a relatively low value device. So don't be lured into any sort of false sense of security thinking that attackers won't be targeting your device. The moment it's been stood up onto the internet, it will be attacked. Now, I can see from the threat analysis center within Sophos that every single day is generating cases. Now, if you haven't got a monitoring system, you're probably not going to see that this constant attack is going on. But if I drag out all of the logs from the security events and then put it into a spreadsheet just to make it easier and quicker to show you, I can see that the number of 4625 events for the 8-hour period that the logging actually retained for was 33,885 attempts. So on average, I'm getting about 100,000 password brute force attempts a day. When I look at from it's every single second, this device is being subjected to brute force attempts all day long. And also when you look at the number of usernames as well, you can see it's not just limited to the administrator account. Every single permutation is being tried on this. And this is only a small segment of the activity that goes on. This is just an 8-hour snapshot of what's happened. This particular device only has one account on it. It's the administrator account, and the password complexity is over 16 characters involving special characters and numbers. Although it's conforming to complexity of password advice, it is still not going to protect it. It's just a matter of time before this device is compromised. And the more accounts that you have on a device, the more likelihood there is that one of those accounts could be compromised. So this is something to consider about when you risk assess having a Windows server publicly exposing its remote desktop application. As an investigator of hundreds of cyber attacks, I would class having Windows RDP open on the internet as high risk. It does not require a great deal of skill on the part of the attacker. Basically, it requires a simple automated script to brute force usernames and passwords, and it could just be left running until it hits the jackpot. And there might be a variety of reasons why that Windows RDP has been exposed, but it's really important to understand that sooner or later, an account on that device is highly likely to be compromised. Some of the reasons that are provided as rationale for allowing this is that a third provider might require it for administering their services. But if that is the case, then risk assess the implications of this. Windows RDP offers very little protection, and it merely provides an increased surface for your organization that an attacker can target. The next topic I want to touch on is patch and asset management. And in order to protect your environment, you need to know what's running inside it. And it's imperative to have a management policy to ensure that all devices are running up-to-date software with all the required patches. And one of the exploits that we still see now as an initial access point is the exploitation of a vulnerability called proxy shell. It's basically a collection of 3 separate vulnerabilities used as part of a single attack chain. And there are plenty of articles on the internet, including one that we wrote that provide more detail, but it's just this video is not long enough for me to go into that sort of in-depth view. Basically, this exploit was identified back in August 2021. and it's relating to Microsoft on-premise Exchange servers. Doesn't affect the Microsoft Office 365 suite. It's just on-premise stuff. Microsoft were pretty quick to roll out a patch, and any device patch for the July 2021 security updates should be protected. So this is an exploit that's over 18 months old, and yet we're still seeing devices that have not been protected and they're being exploited. And what this exploit allows is an attacker to create what are known as web shells on an Exchange server, which then allows them to execute remote code on those devices. The next step for the attacker is then to install additional remote access tools for persistence, and then we frequently see credentials being harvested from the device. As a domain administrator will have logged into that device at some point, there's a good chance that one of those accounts have been compromised. An attacker can then begin to laterally move up the Exchange server to more high-value devices, such as domain controllers or devices where sensitive information is stored that's then exfiltrated. Many of these attacks result in the deployment of ransomware as well, and they could have been prevented with a robust patch management system. This is just one of the most prevalent vulnerabilities that we're still seeing at the moment, and it's over 18 months old. And the final point I want to talk about is multi-factor authentication. Now, from my point of view, this really is one of the most effective security measures that can be implemented to protect users. Now, just consider for a moment how many different accounts a user may have, not just for your organization, but across the board. And unless they're using a password management system, there is highly likely going to be some password reuse. We can put out as many advisories as we like. The bottom line is that the average human mind can only remember a very small amount of passwords. And also, many people use their work email address to sign up for other accounts. Despite what policies may say, it does happen. So if there is password reuse, then you are including that additional variable within the risk of compromise of those work accounts. Also, just take a moment to consider how your users are accessing your network. If all that is required to authenticate on your VPN is a username and password, what other methods are you using to protect that access? We deal with a variety of different incidents, and many of them, the initial access point is a compromised user able to utilize the VPN to access the environment and then laterally move and then create far more impactful aspects within there, including ransomware or data exfiltration. Additionally, when a user accesses your network, you need to be thinking, how am I going to protect that? And multi-factor does help in that aspect. Just consider the sheer volume of phishing emails that each person endures on a daily basis, all with a variety of different levels of sophistication. Some of that might be targeted, some might just be a spray and pray phishing campaign. All of it's designed to try and compromise user credentials. And whilst MFA is not going to excuse poor password hygiene or complexity, it does help mitigate some of the risk of that. Now, obviously, the manner in which it's implemented is also going to be a contributing factor. Personally, I would recommend the use of a system that incorporates one-time passcodes that expire rather than what's known as push notifications. It's much better if a user has to enter a code they see on their device onto the screen at the point of authentication, and then that code expires in a short space of time within 30 seconds, rather than just clicking on a tick they see on their phone. There's a big margin of error in that, and users tend to be a little bit click happy sometimes. And so finally, one of the resistance points that provided when I recommend multi-factor authentication is the user experience. Now, I accept that getting users to adopt this extra layer of security can sometimes result in some pushback, but the user experience for people that cannot access anything as an entire network has been encrypted due to ransomware is going to be far more impactful than having to tolerate multi-factor authentication.